Share screen. All right, sorry, getting a little bit late to start, but I'm ready to go now. Okay, so Lamentations, the book of Lamentations, as Patty was saying, it's a really uplifting read. They don't call it Lamentations for nothing, but it's I think a great book for us to read right now as we are entering into this time of Holy Week. So background to Lamentations, this little picture here, I used to do an art show. I did the music for an art show, high school art exhibit for Catholic high school artists. I used to be on the Fine Arts Committee for the Archdiocese, and the high schoolers would submit art, and this is one of my favorites. This is from 2016, I think, one of the entries. It's a beautiful piece of art. I like how it captures that Lamentations there. So what's going on in Lamentations? So Lamentations is traditionally attributed to Jeremiah. And in fact, in some Bibles back in the day, it was actually part of the book of Jeremiah. And it wasn't separated until later, which makes sense. If you recall from our study of Jeremiah, there are a whole bunch of different styles, a whole bunch of different stuff that is in that book. I talked about it being like a collection of works instead of like a really easy thing to read through. It would make sense that there's also this kind of section of Lamentations for Jeremiah. It's a collection of 5 laments. And the first 4 laments are acrostic poems in the original Hebrew. So again, I think we've all probably done acrostic poems before, maybe in school or whatever, but I wrote an acrostic, putting significance on the first letter of each line, organizing to spell something or follow A to Z, exactly in order, helps with memory, makes an acrostic poem. It's not the greatest poem ever written, but look, on the side it says poem. So that's what an acrostic does. It says something and you read down the file and it tells you the letters. For Lamentations, it is from A to Z in the Hebrew language. Now, this obviously loses something in translation because we don't have the same letters, and it would be really, really tough to translate that and to make it make sense from A to Z, starting each line with that letter. It would be nigh near impossible. So, and it would certainly hurt the integrity of the poem and what's being meant to be said. But that was the idea, and the idea is it's kind of a lament from A to Z, a complete lamentation, crying out to God. The last one does not follow that pattern. It's kind of like that pattern is thrown out a bit. And has long been accustomed to read this book during Holy Week. I cannot think of a better time to read it. As we start Holy Week, well, tonight or tomorrow, Palm Sunday, with the reading of the Passion, and we end our Holy Week with we end Palm Sunday gospel reading where we leave Jesus off is he's dead in the tomb. That's great to lament that and to mourn that and to contemplate that and to enter into that mystery. And then as we continue to meditate upon in Holy Week on Holy Thursday and Good Friday and Holy Saturday, we have the opportunity to consider, what does it mean that Christ has died for us and that Christ has died for our sins? It's a beautiful thing for us to consider. So there's not really a better time to read Lamentations than this week. So that's why I pulled it for this week. And I wanted to connect it to Jeremiah. So when we did our Bible study on Jeremiah back in October, or whenever that was, maybe September, I hadn't really realized that Lamentations was connected to Jeremiah, actually. Maybe at one point in time I knew that, but I had forgotten it, if I ever knew it. And so I just thought it was kind of the standalone book. But yes, it was connected by Jeremiah to Jeremiah, and I thought I'd like to study that some more. I'd like to look at what that means. So here is, again, just a little review of these important dates. We talked about that in Jeremiah. If you want to go back and revisit, you can go see that. All those Bible studies are on the website under Faith Formation Bible Studies or Adult Faith Formation Bible Studies. And so remember, in Jeremiah, there was the good part about the finding of the Torah. All these reforms happened. And then in 605, things started really going bad, where Assyria fell to Babylon, and then Babylon took over, and then they conquered Jerusalem, and they kicked people out piece by piece. And the first one was just kind of take out the royal family to kind of eliminate some of the leadership. And Babylon thought that would be enough, but people kept on revolting. So they had to take greater measures and take out all the leadership in the second part. And then finally, because they kept revolting and kept turning against their rule, they got rid of everything, and they destroyed the temple and really tried to root out the Jewish people. So everything has been destroyed. And that's the time in which Jeremiah is living. And so a reminder here that where we are of Jeremiah, again, this is just a repeat slide for the most part. Jeremiah sounds pretty harsh when you read Jeremiah, and it's like, man, it's really unpleasant. Well, again, remember the time that he was writing. The kingdom, everything he loved was being torn apart piece by piece. And Lamentations is the sadness that is experienced when all has been lost. I might say that there are some that lament quite a bit during this time of pandemic of all the things that have been lost. And that is a fair thing to do, I think. I mean, it is a great tragedy that basically 2 years of seniors in high school have had what is a normal senior in high school year kind of ripped away from them. They don't get that. One of my nephews is a kindergartner and has not been in school all year long. He's over in Washington State. Well, that is something to lament. That's pretty sad. I mean, you only get to experience kindergarten once, and to experience it at your home virtually, it's not the same. It's pretty sad. And it's what Lamentations does is it gives us permission to cry and to lament and to say that's part of the human experience. We sometimes think that if we are good Christians and we are happy all the time and everything is hunky-dory and we're all good and yay God, and boy, if you're not singing the praises of God all the time, and then something's wrong with you. And it's okay to lament. Some people have commented that that sometimes, like people, when you go to mass or whatever, to have all this yay Jesus music, it doesn't always relate with everybody, and sometimes people need I'm not feeling that. And it can be we want, mass to be uplifting and happy and everything, but sometimes it's really inauthentic to the experience that people are having. And so mass needs to have the time where we kind of lament and we say it's okay to cry. That was I don't know if anyone remembers that that record back in must have been the 70s, Free to Be You and Me. It was quite trendy. We had the record that was by, oh, who was it? This was just, I would have put up the graphic, but this just appeared in my brain. But go ahead and look up It's All Right to Cry. Crying takes the sad right out of you. It's all right to cry. It was a kind of a kid's record, and it was about all these themes about who we are as people and everything. Marlo Thomas, dug that out of my brain. Marlo Thomas. So you can look that up. Free to be you and me. So it's all right to cry. That's kind of the message of Lamentations. Or remember, if we would have writing, and we do have writings of people in the in Nazi Germany during the Second World War, you're not going to get a whole bunch of really happy songs or poems written about when their land has been taken away from and their family has all been killed and all that. They're not saying, yay, God. No, there's a lot of lamentations going on. And so that's the idea of Lamentations. Or if you have seen, I just pulled this off the internet somewhere. This was a good image, but one of my favorite musicals, I actually did this when I was a junior in high school, Fiddler on the Roof. And so it really ends quite sadly, but with a little bit of hope. It's kind of like Lamentations, really, where the Russians are coming in and they're kicking out the Jewish people from their town of Anatevka. I don't remember what the context is or why they have to leave, but they're taking over the land or whatever, and they're kicking out all the Jewish inhabitants there, or they're destroying the town. I don't remember, but they all have to leave Anatevka. And there's this really wailing, sad song, Anatevka, Anatevka. It's very lamenting, very sad. And the musical, I think it's one of the best musicals ever written. It really takes you on a whole journey of happiness, sadness, reality, tradition. What do we do with these new ideas in the world? People are reading books and they're reading philosophy and what's going on. Can we accept this? Does it go against our tradition? What's going on? Great musical. But it really ends quite sad, but with a little bit of hope. That's what Lamentations does as well. And the fact that people don't get to do high school musicals in these last 2 years. What sadness. How do I say this on a live production? There are really good high school musicals around here, and that was not necessarily the case where I was before. And so I was really looking forward to like the Shawnee Mission School District's productions and everything. And but alas, and we have some kids there. I was like, oh, good. I've got an excuse to go to Northwest High School to see their show or whatever. But alas, it's not the case right now. But we have hope that it'll come back. But I lament. So why the lament? Why all this sadness? Well, let's review our history here. Let's review our Bible studies that we've looked at. We looked at the book of Exodus, where God says, I have come down to rescue them. They were in slavery in Egypt, and God came and did this amazing thing for them, took them out of slavery. Remember all those plagues? And remember he did the Red Sea bit, and they walked through there, and he said, I'm going to take you to the promised land, and all these others, I'm going to remove all of them. You are going to help me remove all these people because I am giving you this land. This is my gift to you. I have promised it to you. I promised it to you, to Moses, and this land is yours. I am giving it to you. We read in Numbers, when you enter the land of Canaan, this is the territory that shall fall to you. It was very clearly delineated. This is your land. I am giving it to you. We read in Joshua. We did our Bible study in Joshua back in the summer, I think. Here is the land, and this is how it shall be divided amongst all the 5 tribes. I am giving this to you. Furthermore, I forgot to put in there, but the construction of the temple that was commanded by, or that David said, should God just live in a tent? No, we should build him a temple, and this beautiful temple that's built by King Solomon. All of this, it's a gift from God. It is the dwelling place of God. That's the thinking of the people of the time. And now it's gone. So the basic point is the land was a gift from God, and the people squandered it because of their sins. This is your fault, people. That's what the basic sense is that Jeremiah is trying to stress. That's what we hear in Lamentations. That's why there's all the sadness. And I think perhaps we've experienced that in our own lives. I mean, I have a great capacity to beat myself up about things. But some people have capacity to do that for various things. But, you know, it really hurts when you know that you could have done better and you didn't. Like in sports or whatever, you know, I could have, I blew it. I just blew it. Back in 7th grade, I think I took 4th place in the spelling bee. I was very proud of that. I was very excited about, I took 4th place in the spelling bee, and I studied so much. I was ready. And then I was going to say, okay, but it wasn't quite good enough to like actually go to the next level, but I placed 4th place in my school. I'm like, okay, next year, 8th grade, I'm going to nail it. I went to so we had our, you know, the first round in the, you know, you do the first round in the classroom. And then if you win that, then you get to go and do it with the school. So I got 4th place out of the school. It might have even been 3rd place. I mean, I might have been like the next one on 3rd or 4th place, but not quite enough that I could go there to the next level, the citywide competition or whatever. 8th grade, first word I'm given. I've been studying. My word is detective. I start DEC, and I realized I had messed up. I remember in a spelling bee, once a letter is said, it's done. And I was like, oh no. Detective. So I've never let myself live that down with detective. DEC. And I even see the look on my teacher's face that she looked at me like, oh, Kent. Because I think she knew how excited I was. And I blew it in the first round. Not one word done. My first word, detective. Oh, lament. I have a great capacity to beat myself up. But I mean, I'm pretty much over that, although I still remember it's detective. But I always think of detective every time I see that word. Lament, right? So you blew it. You could have done better, but you didn't. The whole people of God, you could have done better, but you went to sin. So a summary then of these 5 laments, and this is courtesy of the, well, no, I mean, I use that book of Brant Petrie and the other guy that I can never remember. So the summary of the 5 laments, the first one is Jerusalem weeps. So this is kind of from the point of view of Jerusalem as a woman, as a mother, weeping for the sadness that she has lost all of her children. So it's kind of from that perspective of Lady Jerusalem, if you will. So Jerusalem is abandoned and disgraced. Chapter 1, verse 9, her filth is on her skirt. She gave no thought of how she would end. Astounding is her downfall with no one to console her. Look, Lord, upon her misery. So all this sadness of Jerusalem as a woman weeps for her children or for sadness. Chapter 2, we hear about the destruction against Zion. Now, I should have put up a graphic again, but again, I would turn your attention to the Bible Project, which are really great less than 10-minute videos have really great graphics. It's beyond what I can do, but it's really, really good and a very concise summary. So the Bible Project, look it up on YouTube. I think, Dawn, you're the one that turned my attention to that. So it's really good. It's not Catholic, so Baruch is not there, but you can find Lamentations. But it talks about the wrath of God in that little video and the anger of God. And we don't like thinking of God being wrathful. But he does a nice kind of little explanation of that God is slow to anger. That's the phrase that we hear in the Psalm, slow to anger and rich in kindness. But that doesn't say he's never to anger. It just says he's slow to anger. But God eventually, if there's enough injustice, if there's enough sin, that's going to rouse God up, if you will. That's kind of the idea, that God can only stand so much injustice. And that's actually good news, right? So that's why we lament, right? That God, when will you come in and intervene? When are you going to stop this? I mean, there's so much injustice in our world. Sometimes we'd like the wrath of God to step up and smite some of these bad things that are going on. We got to eliminate all this sin. There's so much injustice in our world. We want God to intervene. Now, we won't necessarily, as moderns, use the word wrath because we don't like that word. But that's the idea the Old Testament folks would use, is the wrath of God. We might, I don't know what we'd say, the just God intervenes and comes in and takes care of this. We've got all kinds of injustices in our world. We need God to do his God thing and intervene. I mean, obviously, on a much, much, much smaller level, people want the wrath of the pastor sometimes. Again, we're not going to use that word, but I have heard sometimes that people say, hey, Father, you're a little wishy-washy. You need to step up and stop this. You know, someone is saying these things. Why aren't you saying anything about, what's going on at the border? You're too silent, Father. Why aren't you saying anything about abortion? You're too silent, Father. Why aren't you doing this? Get up and do your thing. Be responsible. Well, think in those terms of God. Come on, God. You said you're a just God. Well, why is there all this evil in the world? Come on, do your thing, God. That's kind of the idea of the wrath of God. We would prefer the term of justice or taking responsibility or whatever. That's the idea of wrath. So the idea is in the second lament is God has been finally fed up with the injustices that are going on of the people of Israel. That's why they got exiled, is because enough was enough and he could not take any more of it. Have got to kick people out. That's the result. That's the punishment. The third chapter is about the man who has seen affliction. This is the longest chapter. So this is, the longest chapter, the longest lament. It's triple length, actually, because every letter gets 3 lines instead of 1. So remember, it's an alphabetical poem. So Lament 3 is the longest. It's right there in the center. And he spends 3 lines on each letter. So as you're looking through, it's like, boy, that seems a little bit longer. Well, there's a reason for that, because it is. And I'm reminded of what's that? I am a man of constant sorrows. Is that from, what is that from? The Soggy Bottom Boys, from whatever that movie is. But it also has one of my favorite, in this passage is one of my favorite funeral readings for the proper context. That is chapter 3, verse 17 and following. My soul is deprived of peace. I have forgotten what happiness is. I tell myself, my future is lost, all that I hoped for from the Lord. Remembering it over and over leaves my soul downcast within me. We go way down to the depths. And then we pick it back up with hope. But I will call this to mind as my reason to have hope. The favors of the Lord are not exhausted. His mercies are not spent. When I have a difficult funeral, and if the situation is right, I recommend this for the first reading. If I've got a car wreck, if I've got cancer, if I've got whatever, where people are angry with God. People, again, sometimes expect, you go to a funeral, oh, it's a celebration of life. Let's be happy he's with God now. And that might be true, but that's not where we are emotionally at that time. So we need to honor the lament. We need to honor the sadness. We need to honor that emotion and say it's okay to be angry with God. It's okay to be mad at God. It's okay to express all those things. You might have friends that are telling you, well, he's in a better place now, or it's all in God's plan, or whatever. That's the worst thing you can say to someone who's just lost their child in a car wreck or whatever. It's all in God's plan. What kind of God is that, right? Let's go to my soul is deprived of peace. All my future is lost. Everything sucks. To use the common parlance, everything is awful. But I won't give up everything. I won't fall into despair. My reason, and just even talking about it just brings tears to my eyes because it's really so beautiful. This is what it's about. When everything is at the worst, I will hold on to this as my reason for hope. So in Jeremiah's context, it is the sadness that their whole land has been lost. And in our context, we find that sometimes. It's a great prayer to pray when you are dealing with real sadness, with deep depression, and you might be falling into despair. Keep out of despair. Here's Lamentations. His mercies are not spent. They are renewed each morning. So great is his faithfulness. My portion is the Lord, says the soul, my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. If you can bring that to yourself or to someone who is dealing with real deep sadness, this is I don't know of a better passage. Oops, I forgot to adjust this here. Forgot to take that little thing out. Let me adjust here. A little behind the scenes here. Let's see here. Animate, build, order. I need to move this up here. There we go. All right. Boop. To review. And that's where it's supposed to go. All right. So then we have the Lament 4. Now this is this is probably the most difficult one to read. It's really about the terrible situation that Jerusalem is in in this time of the exile. That things are really bad. There's no food. There's great famine. The babes cry for food, but there is no one to give it to them. Those accustomed to dainty food perish in the streets. Those brought up in purple now cling in the ash heap. So all these things, it used to be so good, and now it's terrible. Verse 10 is really awful in chapter 4. So what depths are things at in Jerusalem? That is Lament 4. That things are really, really bad. And they're crying out. And then finally, the fifth lament is the prayer of those living in Jerusalem. And most interestingly, I think, is that it really ends with a question, but that's interesting in this version. That is interesting. I hadn't noticed that. But so the New American Bible is quite a very different translation, and I just now noticed that. The Revised Standard is the way I think it's supposed to end. It's supposed to end with a question. It says, "Why do you forget us forever? Why do you so long forsake us? Restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may be restored. Renew our days of old. Or have you utterly rejected us? Are you exceedingly angry with us?" The end. No answer to that question. In the New American, it's very different. It says, "For now," it's a statement, "for now you have indeed rejected us and in full measure turned your wrath against us." I think that it's meant to end with a question. I think it's meant to end unresolved. What are you going to do, God? And that's one of the reasons that it really is a great entrance in to read this during Holy Week. And one of the things I sometimes encourage people to do, especially like Good Friday, is to consider, what does it mean that God is dead? That God really died for us. And we enter into that darkness. We enter into the tomb, right? And what would it mean? It can be an interesting spiritual exercise. What would it mean if God stayed dead, if God didn't rise again, if the verdict was still out? What were the apostles thinking on Good Friday and Holy Saturday? They had heard that he was going to rise again, but there was no proof of it yet because he hadn't. He was really dead for 3 days, depending on how you're counting. Or if you do it liturgically, it's like the next day. Because Easter Saturday, I was back. It's a very brief time away, but it's still enough to enter into the darkness and the sadness. So it's 3 days. On the third day, he rose again. Well, that's a long time for God to be dead in Jesus Christ. If you think of, how long when you're experiencing tragedy, if someone like gets in a car wreck or something and you don't have any news for like a day, that is like the longest day. Now imagine 3 days, you don't have any news from that person. That is really, really long. But then it ends happily and everything is good. But it's good to enter into that question and into that sadness. What would it mean? Because I think that then the answer that is provided with Christ being raised is even more powerful. And so in this time of Lamentations, when this is written, they are still in the exile. There is still the question, will they ever return? And they do. And how? And so much bigger than they could have even imagined. But in Lamentations, it's still the question. So again, that's a good book, I think, to read for this time of Holy Week. All right, so book 1. Now we'll go into our second book for today. This one will theoretically be a bit briefer, but that's Lamentations. And for our second bonus study of the day, we will talk about Baruch. And again, this is also a good book to read during Holy Week, but for a little bit of a different reason. Okay, so this is a review as well. I like putting up my review slides, just kind of keeping them basically the exact same. So like, oh yeah, I've seen this slide before. Yes, you have. So, it's very blue and green. All right, so remember that the deuterocanonical books, it means second canon. It's sometimes called the Apocrypha, but that means false writings. So that this is not a false writing according to Catholics. This is a true writing. Remember, there's a difference between the Hebrew canon and the Greek canon, what was found in Hebrew and what was known in Greek. This is one of those books that was not really known, or not all parts of it were known there in the Greek in the Hebrew canon. Again, here are these 7 books of the Deuterocanonical, along with parts of Daniel and something else. But hey, look, in our Bible study, we have done a lot. We have done 4 of the Deuterocanonical books. One of these days, I hope to do Sirach and 1st and 2nd Maccabees. The violent revolution of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. I heard years ago that Mel Gibson wanted to do a movie about the Maccabees, the Maccabean Revolt. And remember how bloody the Passion of the Christ was. You can imagine what the Maccabean movie would be like, but I don't think that's happening, which might be fine. But I would mind seeing a movie, but maybe just not by Mel Gibson, because he has a way with blood. It seems like if you look at a lot of his movies. So, all right. So background to Baruch. So the historical Baruch that we know about, he was the scribe to the prophet Jeremiah. Now there are other Baruchs in the Old Testament. The name is a pretty common name. It means blessed. So we hear about him in Jeremiah in chapters 32, 36, 43, and 45. There might be a couple other mentions, but those are the bigger mentions of Baruch. We hear about him in Jeremiah. Again, so this seemed like a good time to talk about the book of Baruch because it's short. It's only 6 chapters long. And we are on the Jeremiah theme. So Lamentations traditionally attributed to Jeremiah, and Baruch was Jeremiah's scribe. So it kind of fits into this story here. Like Jeremiah, the authorship of this book is complicated. There is a variety of stuff in Jeremiah, and did all of it come from the mouth or pen of Jeremiah? It's complicated. And so, but I mean, part of the complication of Jeremiah is, of course, that Baruch probably wrote some of it. But also, who edited it and what else was added, and some of it is in the spirit of Jeremiah. I talked about Jeremiah being like a file, and I would say the same thing with Baruch. It's kind of like an anthology. So kind of like if you have something like the collected works of Saint Teresa of Avila, this would be kind of like that as well in Baruch. And like Jeremiah, I used the analogy of like one of those day-by-day books of Pope John Paul II or whatever, read some things, and it was just not particularly well organized, Jeremiah, or at least not in our modern sense. Again, kind of like a day-by-day book, or like a file cabinet where you have a bunch of different files that aren't necessarily organized alphabetically. One of the things that I did during my spring break is I organized my file cabinet over the office. So it's much more organized now. I finally got rid of several things that I don't think I will ever need that Father Jim had left me. And so I was like, well, this is from 2010. I think I can probably let this go, or whatever. So I had a whole bunch of stuff. I was organizing them, but still I don't have them like alphabetically organized or whatever. I just have this file and this file. And the ones that I need more often are kind of closer to the front, and the ones that I don't need as much kind of slip to the back. So that's kind of a way to think also of Baruch and Jeremiah. Much more Jeremiah, but Baruch is also like an anthology. It's just a bunch of stuff that's kind of collected together, and it doesn't necessarily all connect. It's not like a good kind of straight through reading. Just a bunch of different stuff put in there. So remember our history here. We hear in chapter 1 of Baruch read the words of this scroll for Jeconiah, son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, to hear it. So this is when Baruch lived. He lived in the time of 3 bad kings and in the time of the exile. Now, as Petrie mentions, a lot of modern scholars really question if it really came from the hand of Baruch, and that's a fair question. I'm not going to get into all the details about that. but some about the dating and stuff of where things are happening. It seems to have kind of a disconnect. But again, like a lot of our Old Testament books, it's complicated to know where it all came from, and some of it maybe had the origin, but then it's edited over time, or this is attributed to Baruch or whatever. So, but this is the time in which Baruch lived. Basic structure of Baruch is we have in the first part, we have kind of, so the different styles that we have different styles, like Jeremiah had different styles. In our file, we have different styles as well. So the first part is a narrative. It tells the story of Baruch and the repentance of the Babylonian exiles. So the importance of turning back to God, God is still faithful. There is still reason for us to pray, turn to him, repent. Those are part of that. Again, I got this organization from Bergsma and Petrie. If you have one book on the Old Testament, that's the one I recommend. It's so good. I mean, it's a little bit in depth. There are some, if you want briefer, but if you want any kind of commentary or in-depth thing, whew, that has been a godsend. I have really enjoyed that book. You hear a poem, a different style there, chapter 3, verse 9 through chapter 4. It's in praise of wisdom. We have an oracle in chapter 4 about the hope that there is for Jerusalem. And then the final part is, it really feels tacked on. Like someone in the Bible, as they were putting together the Bible stuff, said, oh, we have this letter from Jeremiah. Well, where do we put that? Well, it doesn't really fit in Jeremiah. We've already got that settled. And Lamentations, well, let's throw in the Baruch file. So it really doesn't fit. But, I mean, it fits in the sense that Baruch was the scribe, so, you know, it maybe got in his stuff, and so we'll put it in his book or whatever. But it's all about idolatry and the importance of staying faithful, not turning away from God and not turning away from the true God to go to idols. I talked about that a bit before, I think, in wisdom. We see reference to this in the 29th chapter of Jeremiah, where it makes reference to the letter that's going out. Let me see if I can pull that up quickly. Yeah, if you look in chapter 29 of Jeremiah, it says, this is the contents of the letter which the prophet Jeremiah sent from Jerusalem to the remaining elders among the exiles and prophets, etc. So it makes reference to the letter in the book of Jeremiah, and in the book of Baruch is the letter that's attributed to Jeremiah. And yes, that's the basic point. Stay faithful to God. Don't turn to idols, even in this time. Now, why are we covering this book, besides the fact that both Lamentations and Baruch are short? That's one reason. They are both connected to Jeremiah. That's the other reason. But the other reason is I think this is a great book to read also during Holy Week. And so you can read chapter 6. You can read the whole thing. It's real short. I don't know if that has as much for us now for us to consider, and it's not as rich. There's a basic point: stay faithful to God, don't turn to idols. But I think the real richness of Baruch lies in that 3rd chapter and the 4th chapter. They are beautiful readings, and it's a great way to contemplate. So if you really enjoyed, for instance, wisdom that we studied, what was that, last week? If you really enjoyed wisdom, this is another kind of connection there. It really ties in well and can be a great meditation upon with the wisdom of God. And as Petrie says, he kind of advances the theology even as kind of this almost incarnate wisdom that kind of points the way to Christ. We will also be reading this at the Easter Vigil. So we are doing, for the Vigil, we are doing 4 Old Testament readings and the Epistle and the Gospel. And there are options that you can choose. I think there are 7 Old Testament readings that you could choose. And I chose Baruch intentionally because I knew that we were going to look at it. So like, oh, all the factors being equal, let's do Baruch. So that's why I chose Baruch. Side note here, we are doing 4 Old Testament readings. The minimum I think that we could do is 2, but that seems, I know we're trying to keep Mass kind of shorter, but that just doesn't hardly seem worth the price of admission for the Easter Vigil. When you come and you kind of are expecting, a bunch of readings in darkness and everything, and you only get 2, I don't know. That doesn't seem like enough to me, because that would just leave us Genesis and Exodus. And so we have the horse and chariots or whatever, and then we go right into the Gloria. I don't think we've earned the Gloria with just 2 readings. So I want to do a couple more. And then I didn't want to do 3, because if we do 3 Old Testament readings, then we have an unbalance with English and Spanish. So if we have 6 readings, 3 and 3, we're balanced. So that was the method to the madness. So we have Genesis, Exodus, something else, and Baruch. I don't remember what the 4th one is. I think it's Isaiah, but it might be Ezekiel. And then we have Paul, I think it's to the Romans, and then the Gospel. But Baruch, take note, if you're going to be watching or participating in the Easter Vigil, we have chosen that reading. And since I'm pastor, I get to have some say, and I chose Baruch because we're studying it. And then the other thing is chapter 4 and 5, I think, is a perfect follow-up to Lamentations. So it really almost fits with that book. You could put it there. Again, there's very different stuff. So the letter to Jeremiah could go in the book of Jeremiah. The part of wisdom could go with wisdom. This part of the oracle could go in Lamentations. The narrative part could go in like 2 Kings. So there are some other places that those things could go. So it fits very well with our book of Lamentations. But remember that part that I was talking about with that funeral reading where you go into the darkness and then come out with the hope? That's what this oracle does. It's like an extended version of that. Goes into the darkness, and then you get that beautiful support. It really, the end of chapter 5 just is this spectacular conclusion. It's like the, I don't know, the Hallelujah chorus or whatever, or with Swan Lake, the ballet, one of my favorite ballets of all time. The music to that of Tchaikovsky is amazing, but there's that theme, dun 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 dun, and it's this haunting theme that goes out throughout, but weaves its way through Swan Lake. At the finale, it turns into a major key. I get chills just thinking about da 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 da. It's really triumphant. That's what this feels like, chapter 5. Jerusalem, take off your robe of mourning and misery. Put on the splendor of glory from your God, wrapped in the cloak of justice. Up, Jerusalem, stand up on the heights. Look to the east and see your children. This Jerusalem that was just mourning. Let your enemies on foot they left you, for God is leading Israel in joy by the light of his glory with his mercy and justice for company. Ta-da! The end. In fact, end there. Don't go and read then the letter of Jeremiah. What is this? So the letter of Jeremiah is good. It really kind of throws off the finale, I think. It's like this epilogue that, I wish I could think of an analogy of a great movie that just ends spectacularly and then they just can't finish it. It's like, come on, you should have ended the movie like 20 minutes ago. It was really good then. And then I don't know why you have to have all this explanation at the end. The Lord of the Rings might have done that, if I recall. It might have taken a long time to end that movie. It had a great finale, and then it's like, now they all go back to their lands and they do this, and it's like, okay, we were done 20 minutes ago. So it's all good stuff, but I recommend reading the letter of Jeremiah like first, even maybe chapter 6. Read that first, then read chapters 1 through 5. But don't end with chapter 6, because that ends, the better for the just man who has no idols, he shall be far from disgrace. Okay, great. But the finale of chapter 5, oof, it's powerful. I love it. So, and that's a great way to, again, enter into Holy Week. That's a great thing to read on Holy Saturday. That's not the reading that we read for Holy Saturday, but that's like Saturday morning or getting ready for the vigil. Read chapter 4 and 5 of Baruch. It tells the story. Sadness, and now up Jerusalem. Let's go. Christ is risen. So that is chapter 4 and 5. So that would be what I'd recommend if you're looking for some spiritual reading during this Holy Week. Praise of wisdom and the hope for Jerusalem. Thus ends our study of Baruch and Lamentations. All right, so we will stop there. And now I'm also watching the Facebook. If you have any thoughts there, or if you have any questions here, let me know. Questions, thoughts? We can't unmute, sorry. Mute, allow, there we go, sorry. Try again. Now can you?
Yes.
There you go.
There you go. Very good.
I was like, yes, all got quiet. Oh, you can't unmute yourself.
So unusual.
Sorry I was late, but very good presentation, Father.
Thanks. Great.
We think about refugees around the world and how poor, people are still living in
Can't hear
this misery.
Could you try that again? I can barely hear you.
I said it makes me think about refugees around the world and how people are still living in this misery.
Yes.
It's a move to action for me to try to give.
That's a great perspective to read it from the perspective of someone who is a refugee now, or a migrant, or probably more a refugee, because they can't live in their own land.
I liked your commentary about the high schools doing some pretty good productions from time to time. Back in the 90s, St. Thomas Aquinas had an instructor that was incredible, and they put in the most wonderful, wonderful productions. You weren't here in this area at that time, were you?
I was not. However, I had a friend, her last name is May, and I think she was quite involved and quite good. I never saw her perform, but my mom did, and she said it was excellent, whatever it was. I saw a few things with her, whatever. She went off to LA and did some performing out there, or tried to get some recording. Is it Rebecca May? Not sure.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I made a point of going to all their productions because they were just so well done and so delightful, So I want to tell you that. And then you also told a story about your spelling situation, and I thought I would share just a short one with you too, if you have the time. When I was in 4th grade, I was up before the class to spell a word, as a spelling contest kind of a thing, and the word was Chicago. And I was just, how you blank out sometimes when you're afraid before a group? So we had this marvelous teacher, and he said, your sister's in the Army. I bet she looks like a real chick when she's in her uniform. And I go, CHIC. And he said, but that was long, long ago. And I never, ever forgot how to spell Chicago. And I thought more teachers should be that helpful rather than too long, sit down, you're done. It was great. So I just wanted to share that.
And I think my teacher would have been normally very supportive, but you can't do that in a spelling bee. So you have to spell a word, laid its blade,
Yeah.
said it's dead or something.
I do have two questions if nobody else has something, because I don't want to be the only one talking. Anybody else? Okay. First of all, you talk about the fact that the land was promised, by Moses and so on and so forth. Wasn't that land originally promised by Abraham? To Abraham, I mean.
I was thinking the same thing, but I don't.
I looked it up in Genesis because a gal from another religion has mentioned to me it was promised to Abraham, and that's why the Muslims think they have such claim on Jerusalem, because it's the same promised land. I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought, well, one of these days I'll ask you, and then it just happened to come up here.
Patty, do you happen to recall?
Well, I think it was promised to Abraham, but didn't he consistently remake the promise to the leaders as they went down?
Well,
Abraham,
to Jacob,
Isaac,
of course, for
Jacob.
Israel, and then to Moses, right? But my point
Yeah,
being,
there it is. There it is. Chapter 15 of Genesis. You're right. To your descendants, I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, to the land of Canaanites, Hittites. Yes. So stepping back even further, that's a good catch.
Okay. And then still, if nobody else has anything, my second question has to do with the lost tribes of Israel and the fact that during this period of time you're talking about, there were two kingships of the Israelites tribes between the north and the south, Judah and what was called Israel at that time. What happened to those lost tribes? They never did ever show up anywhere again, did they? And again, I asked a Jewish friend of mine about that, and she goes, who cares? That's not helpful. Her son was a rabbi, and I thought maybe, they'd gotten into that. But no, apparently it all started in the same period of time, right? Where they went with the second kingship of Judah. And then from there on, it just all seemed to, nobody cared about those other tribes anymore.
Yeah, they kind of disappeared, and it became much more about Judah.
So you don't have any more about that either?
I don't.
Now, see,
Sorry.
There goes my belief that you knew everything. I'm so sorry.
I'm amazed it has taken this long, Karen.
I'm a little slow. I'm getting older, Father. Anyway, that's all I had today. Well, except for one other thing. You were talking about chapter 6 of Baruch.
Yep.
And in chapter 6, verse 9 and 10, just blew me right out of the park, because it says, then sometimes the priests take the silver and gold from their gods and they spend it on themselves or give it in part to the harlots. And I'm going, that can't be right. I mean, yes, it was supposedly the priests of the idols, but nonetheless, I thought that was pretty shocking. And then at the very end, in the footnotes itself for chapter 6, number 42, the obligation of Babylonian women was to serve at least once as cult prostitutes. And I thought, good Lord, that means all women were supposed to be used by men for sex at one point in time? I'm glad we didn't live then. That's my response to that one.
Well, that was the Babylonian women, apparently. Not the Jewish women, but since they were conquered, there might have been like the talk, that that they were Babylonians now, so you got to go with the culture. That might have been what was happening too. But the Babylonian women apparently were required to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that whole chapter is pretty much the idols and the people that do the idols and don't do that and all that sort of thing. But it just seems so shocking to me.
Right. And again, that can be helpful for us. Where was that thing about the god, the priest to the harlots? Where was that? Oh, there it is. Chapter 9 and 10. Take gold from their gods and spend it. And I believe that's the Babylonians again. I don't think that's the Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. differences in the cultures is what I'm talking about. They are more than just what happened to the Israelites,
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It occurred to me that they weren't scared enough of their gods to take away the gifts they gave them to use them for themselves. They gave these false gods all these things, but then when nobody was looking, they would just take them back or something. Those gods definitely were not real.
Right.
Even to them.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, if we study like mythology or whatever, it seems like for a lot of people, the gods weren't really real sometimes, even they talked about the gods. For some they were, but for some they were not. So.
I would think some of it was to control the masses, but not, the masses had to think that they were real, but then the leaders, they had a different take on it probably.
Sure.
So.
Well, as usual, Father, it was very good. And again, I apologize for being late. They have a young priest over at St. Joe's, which is where I go on Saturday mornings when I'm doing these 40 masses during the Lent.
Father Joel.
Yeah, is that who it is? Anyway, it's fine. He just is slower because generally speaking, it's an 8:15 mass, and I'm out of there at 8:45. And today that didn't happen, but it's fine. He did a good job. I see where St. Joe's. I went last night to your Stations of the Cross, which was the first time this year, and it was wonderful. I hope to go back at 3:00 on Friday, but. It was interesting to me that we now have every other pew instead of every third pew for people to sit in. Is that going to help with Easter?
Theoretically.
Well, hopefully. They announced this morning, Father Joel announced this morning, that every single one of the Easter weekend masses are all totally spoken for now. And so they're going to be doing 2 masses, one over in the school, which is a long ways away in the gymnasium, and the other one at the church, of course, for the 9:30 mass only. I mean, they're doing a lot of masses, but for that particular one, they're going to do 2 because of that. Are we going to split out again as we've done in the past for all of our masses?
We are not. We decided. We talked. We had a long conversation about that at the staff meeting. What are we going to do? Because we're full for the English masses. And we have been taking some. For people who have called in, to what we can get in, we're pretty sure. Now it depends. Like if there's a whole bunch of like singles or double or twos, but I think we're pretty sure we can get in more than 200 safely. And so, but our sign up was 200. It's always been our policy that we've had fewer on the sign up Genius than is actually available, so that we allow for walk-in traffic.
Mm-hmm.
We are hopeful that with the walk-in traffic that will come on Easter, that we will be able to accommodate them.
Good.
If it's and in the church. We will have space in the social hall if necessary, or the narthex if less necessary, like people could sit in there if there's just not room in the church. And if there's like a whole bunch of people, then we will encourage people to come back to either watch online or to come back at the 4 p.m. because the 4 p.m. mass, I know it's not an ideal time, or maybe not an ideal bilingual idea, but there's still space there. So we still have room at our mass. So the discussion was, until all of our masses are full, including the Easter Vigil and the 4 o'clock, there's still space if people really want it. Maybe not the ideal time, but we still have space.
I heard this morning when my son calls from Oklahoma all the time, and this last week he was also in Florida. He flies for FAA. He said Oklahoma now does not require any masking or any distancing, and neither does Florida, because he just got back from Florida the day before yesterday. And I thought that was very interesting, because Kansas is still locked down as bad as we always were, or as completely, I guess you should say.
Yeah, different approaches. Patty, you were going to say something?
I was going to ask, the 8 o'clock on Saturday is not yet full.
It is not.
Okay.
You mean
will-
for
Last
this
I checked.
weekend, right? You're talking about this weekend?
No, I'm talking about Easter Vigil.
Because I didn't know that the signups for Easter were already available.
Yeah, they went in like 2 hours last Sunday.
Oh, well, I took care of that then.
Yeah, my daughter called me and goes, "Oh my gosh, they're full already."
Well, the 7 o'clock a.m. was not full in 2 hours. The 9 and
Well,
the
I
11.
can tell you they would not make it to a 7 o'clock a.m.
So how do I sign up for the Easter Saturday night then now? Do I go through
Go to
the
sign up.
website?
Go to sign up Genius. It's
Yeah,
on the website.
I always
Yep.
wait for the email, click on the email, and away I go. So I'm signed up for this weekend, of course, but
Well, the email already came out for the. It should have come out already for. I mean, that went live noon last Sunday
yeah.
for all of the Easter, for Palm Sunday and all of the Easter celebrations.
Yeah, I just didn't pay attention closely enough. I'll try to go it through the website and get that done for the Saturday night. Thanks for letting me know there's room on it.
There is room on the Saturday night, and we'll read Baruch. Yeah. So yeah, we went round and around about what to do. We just decided we talked about doing a mass in the gym. We talked about doing mass in the social hall. We just didn't think that would. We are of the opinion, especially with our what we got for Christmas, we are of the opinion, and we don't know, we could be wrong, that we'll be okay. So
Okay.
That accommodates a lot more people with extra mass and every other pew. And I wasn't uncomfortable at all at morning mass with every other pew. It seemed fine.
Right. We probably could have done that quite some time ago, but with the combination of just opening up the church and adding another mass, we're hoping that we're going to be okay. We might not be, but
Well,
and this is the first year we have the virtual mass available.
Well, we had the virtual mass available last year, but there was not the real mass.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
That's
last
true, but
year
nobody
we
knew how to
didn't
use
know.
it. I mean,
yeah.
No, by that time, lots of people were already on virtual.
yeah.
But that's the only option that we had last year.
I remember the first few times I signed up for the virtual mass after the pandemic began, and I would get in and it would be wonderful, and then I had no sound, or the picture would fall away. So
I remember those comments there, Karen. You had some very frustrated comments.
I ended up going with Bishop Barron for a while till we opened back up because I could count on it being the full mass,
A good option.
You did good, Father. You got it all together eventually.
I like the new cameras too that go down.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, those are nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I was telling Raffaele is it's funny, you're watching Father up there and you see the legs of the people in the choir. I kept looking, I better wear some nice pants if I'm going to stand up there.
But I have to tell you, I've been immensely impressed with how Father Kent has done, and for the various other priests that probably didn't have a background in the IT industry, and yet they were able to go with this and figure it out. I really commend you for that. I think that's fantastic.
Thanks. We're living in Lord. We have a good team between Father Ashmore and Raffaele and Miguel and Mary Mueller. We've all kind of patchworked stuff together and figured things out. So
you made it work, and I think it's fantastic. We thank you for that. And on that cheery note, I will leave. Thank you again, Father, and let us know for sure when you're going to start up anything again, because I've enjoyed this so much.
Great, very good. I will let you know.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Karen.
Bye.
Donna, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, tell us quick about the 7 last words.
Yes.
On Tuesday?
Tuesday?
So say again.
Is it
Tuesday, 7:30.
Okay.
We would do it
Tuesday
7,
night,
but
right?
what? Patty, you cut out, and now you're frozen. So we'll come back to you. So it's 7:30 on Tuesday. We have 6 o'clock mass, so we can't really do it any earlier. But it's going to be music and meditations. The Franks have done, it was mostly, as I understand it, kind of really organized by the older Franks who are elsewhere now at college and stuff. But Jude Frank is really excited to be a part of it. He's going to make an announcement at the masses this week. And so, but we are expanding a little bit. I think it was, last time we did it was like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And it was pretty much all classical music with meditations, and we are mixing it up a little bit now. We'll have one in Spanish, 1 out of 7, and we'll also have some sung stuff, as what I am understanding. We have a practice for that tomorrow, so I'm not really doing much at all with it, but I'm hoping this can be a really beautiful celebration for years to come. We did this at Curia of Ars, and it was on the Tuesday of Holy Week, and the church was pretty much packed. And that's where I'd like to get us. We won't be there obviously this year, but down the road, I'd like people to just kind of think Tuesday night of Holy Week, that's 7 last words, and it's beautiful, and it really gets me into the season, and I want to be there. So I want this to be the Lenten or Holy Week equivalent to lessons and carols for this time. So really beautiful music, really invites you into the season, and it's something that you want to go to every year. So I'd like lessons and carols in December to get us ready for Christmas, and I'd like 7 last words to get us ready for Holy Week and Easter. That's the plan. You were saying something, Patty, and you cut out?
No, I was just telling her it was at 7:30 on Tuesday.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. We don't have to sign up or anything, do we?
No.
Okay.
We are presuming that it's not going, and we're also canceling, the sign up after Easter, so that there won't have to be a sign up for anything after Easter. So, but I am counting on there not being a need to at this time to, it's not going to be packed. It's going to be under 200, I'm sure. So,
okay.
Because people aren't accustomed to it yet.
All right. Well, probably
very
see
good.
you tomorrow then. Maybe.
Sounds good. Yep, I got 10. So
Okay.
10 and 4.
Bye, guys. 9:45.
Yeah.
Bye.
9. I do 9:45.
Bye.